According to the International Feed Industry Federation, the commercial feed manufacturing industry is a nearly $500 billion business globally. In the U.S. alone, according to the American Feed Industry Association, there are more than 5,800 animal food manufacturing facilities producing more than 284 million tons of finished feed and pet food each year. And the past year has presented a series of challenges to the industry unlike any other in recent memory. Welcome to Feedstuffs in Focus, our podcast taking a deeper look at big issues in the livestock, poultry, grain, and feed industries. I'm your host, Andy Vance. Thanks for joining us. This episode is sponsored by Alltech. Join Alltech for the annual Alltech One Ideas Conference coming up May 25 through 27. You can register for this virtual global agri-food conference by visiting one.alltech.com. In this episode, we'll talk with Dr. Mark Lyons, CEO of Alltech, about what he and his colleagues in the global feed business have learned over the past year and the challenges his company continues to face in COVID hotspots like India and Brazil. We'll also discuss the results of the company's annual global feed survey and the trends the survey uncovered from around the world. Finally, we'll preview Alltech's One Ideas Conference coming up next month. Dr. Lyons, it's been an interesting year, to put it mildly, particularly in the animal ag space that is so globally integrated. I wanted to get your perspective, particularly given your personal experience in some of the markets that have been most touched by COVID-19. I'm thinking about the years you've spent in China, the years you've spent in South America. After this past year of a global pandemic, what are some of the things that you've taken away, some learnings or challenges that you and your colleagues have worked through in the feed industry?
Yeah, I think it's been certainly something that, none of us saw coming. We started last year, I think, with a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for an important year, and one where we had a lot of new initiatives. We were going to be celebrating a year of our Planet of Plenty initiative, and a lot of new things taking shape there. And then, of course, things started to quickly change. And I think we were, maybe because of that presence we have in China, fortunate to see those early beginnings within COVID-19. We had a production team, basically realizing, look, we're either going to perhaps stop production or we're going to have to do something drastic. And we literally moved into our production facility and we're able to keep product going out. And I think that message really resonated around the globe. And we were able to say, look at the levels that our team is taking, the steps they're taking to make sure that we're keeping product going out the door. And I think that kind of galvanized our operations and quality teams to say, hey, this is what we're going to do around the world. And we have almost 100 production sites across the globe today. And I'm happy to say that due to the measures and the steps that we were able to take and the learnings we had in those early days, we've been able to keep all of those operating. And so I think that was a key element. I also think that, we were Alltech's always been a company that's got a great culture and connectivity, but I actually have been reflecting recently. It was just last month in March that we were thinking about the fact that we lost my father 3 years ago, and I think that experience really kind of brought us together as an Alltech family, maybe even more than we have ever been before. And so what I actually found was the team was more connected when something was happening in one part of the world. Somehow we were able to connect together and with the customers throughout COVID in a way that I don't think all organizations were able to. And so that commitment to each other, the commitment to keeping each other safe, and that message that we came out with right at the start, which was that our customers, our colleagues, and our communities were the three most important things in our initiative, and our goal for the year was to keep them safe. I think that really set the tone and has helped us to be able to keep that energy up, and realizing that our job at that stage was to keep the energy of the customers up and all of those that we work with throughout what has been as much a challenge of physical health as mental health, and keeping people's energy and focus where it needs to be. But I would also say, just, as you'd asked, on a personal level, and I think this is something that probably for leadership across a lot of different organizations, companies, governments, this is a situation that is unprecedented. You realize your job is not simply to ensure the profitability of the business. It's actually the health and the well-being of your people, their motivation and their enthusiasm. So So it's been a challenging time, but it's also been one where I think that we as an organization have connected and thankfully come through as best as we could, focused on that fact that we play a role in something that's much bigger than us, much greater, which is making sure that we're keeping food on the tables of so many around the world.
I'm thinking as I'm listening to you talk about your role as a leader and trying to keep the morale up of not just your colleagues and teammates, but your customers as well. It's a really interesting role that you play as a business leader. And of course, then you mentioned your dad. I'm picturing him, kind of being the cheerleader, and that enthusiasm, that irrepressibility that he always brought to the stage, and what it would have been like seeing him in that role. As you think about the challenges of the business that you described. You had keeping your manufacturing sites open, but being able to serve your customers because animals have to eat regardless of a global pandemic or not, and then the logistical challenges, sourcing, labor. How did you meet that as a leader and keep yourself going and in the game and not get run down and burn out? What advice do you have for other leaders in managing your own well-being at the same time you're trying to manage, this cast of partners and colleagues and customers around the world and keep them going?
It's an excellent question. I think, one of the things we realized was we have already in Alltech, thanks to my father, so many jolts of energy and things that get us going. We have our 1 minute charge, of course, that we get every morning, which is an idea, a simple message for the day. We have Be Curious, which captures, so much of that curiosity and excitement he had on Tuesdays. But we added a few more. We have our Wednesday work from home wisdom now. So this is something that maybe is a little bit of a longer read, something that people can dig into to help them to think about their overall wellness. We had already taken the Friday weekly conference call that he would do and converted it into a video message. And then ultimately now, as so many sort of doing, we utilize Teams and we're using that to spread that message. And so we added also regional calls and just this chance to stay connected. But I think it's also being humble, being honest, and realizing, this is a challenge for anyone. I've never stayed this long anywhere in my life. This is the longest we've been away from our ancestral home, Ireland, forever. And for my mother, that's a challenge to be away for so long and to face and challenge all the things that we're all doing. But at the same time, you're responsible for a company and you're responsible for all those people. So it's important to be able to essentially be honest with that, really saying, look, we've got to take care of our health. We might not be traveling as much, but we have other challenges. And I think as a lot of us have found, there's little snippets of time when you were on the road to maybe fall asleep on the plane or have a cup of coffee and switch off for a second. You don't have those when you're on 10, 12 hours of calls all day, video calls all day. And so you really have to be on. And I think that, I made a goal, did a good bit of running as we traditionally do last year, wasn't able to get in the gym, which is a challenge. So I made a goal this year to run 1,000 miles, and a group of us have come together to do that, to also raise funds to go to the Pierce Lyons ACE Foundation and several other charities that we're involved in. And so that those types of things, where you realize I got to take care of my health, but I'm going to do this for some other reason. That gives you that motivation and that drive. And I think it was trying to find those little things constantly and really plug into the creativity that our team has to think about ways that we can continually be encouraging each other, staying connected, and watching out for those that are around us. We launched another thing, which was actually an in-house COVID survey. So we've done this now. I believe we're on our 8th survey. So these tend to be every 6 weeks, just checking in with people. How do they feel? Obviously, as the pandemic has developed, we've changed the questions that we're asking. We've gone from, a lot of questions around people's attitudes towards it. And now, of course, we're talking a lot more about vaccines and people's opinions around those, how we're going to progress forward in that regard. And so, those have all been really helpful things. And I think it's really been that ability to be creative, to constantly keep changing. And maybe it is that Pierce Lyons element within the business that is almost more alive and well than ever through this year that has helped us to come through.
I had a feeling that you had logged quite a few miles yourself during this pandemic. When all else fails, get out and run. So glad to hear I was right in my thinking there. I want to shift gears to, you mentioned doing your COVID survey. Another survey that Alltech does each year that is, I think, a really interesting data point is your global feed survey. Now, this one, I'm just going out on a limb and guessing, was a much different endeavor than the normal process of gathering and analyzing the annual global feed survey. What can you tell us about this year's survey? What kind of trends did we reveal as we were out there scanning the waterfront?
Yeah, I think that one of the big messages for me, probably the most important, was as much as there has been discussion and all sorts of messaging around the feed industry, animal agriculture in general. You could see from these numbers that the feed industry and the meat, milk, and egg production around the world stayed strong. And I think that that is the biggest message we can take away. We have the data to show it, and we were able to continue, on what is our mission to feed the world. I think when you get into the details, one of the most striking was actually the growth within China. And this was very much related to the repopulation of the pig industry. And so China really moving back into that number one position in terms of overall feed production. So those were, I think that was an important one. We stepped back a little bit and we kind of started to think about some different trends that we saw. We did see, not surprising, and something that we are going to be talking about at our one conference in our pet track, the increase in terms of obviously adoption of companion animals, new friends into the home, and that certainly was reflected in pet food. I think we're going to see that actually much more in 2021. We also saw, just as we get into these surveys, we're starting to get more nuanced questions and a big focus on health and sustainability. And it's really been a take home. I think we realized that COVID has acted as an accelerant for a lot of trends that already existed. And so health and sustainability have been two of those. Another big one that kept coming up was trust, trust within the food chain. People saying, I've changed the way I buy. I'm thinking about that next link in the chain, both my suppliers and my customers. And, obviously something that has been a big factor, inclusion has been a big one. But more than anything, again, continuing those trends of consolidation, things that I think we anticipated coming into this year. Latin America with very strong growth. Again, that's a theme that has been with us for a while, followed by Asia Pacific. But to me, the big message, the big take home was just, this is really a great way to demonstrate how the agri-food supply chain, held strong and was really able to perform.
You mentioned that acceleration of trends, and that's been my observation as well. Whether we're talking about people being interested in doing home grocery delivery or doing their grocery shopping online or virtually, digitally at a distance in some way, we could be talking about restaurant and food service changes and people being more willing to do carry out and delivery and using an app and so on. But specific to our industry and that agri-food supply chain from the feed space all the way through to live animal production, when you look at some of those changes that we've gone through over the past year, what are the things that you think are here to stay? What are the opportunities and maybe challenges that you see in the year ahead as we kind of come out of this thing in many parts of the world, still very much in the thick of things in some parts of the world? I'm thinking of India as an example, but as the world sort of turns, what are the challenges, opportunities, and trends that you're watching for the year ahead?
Yeah, I think when we moved into COVID, there was that initial impact of disruption, not knowing how things were going to work. Probably in most markets, we saw almost a stocking up. And I think that is something that we're going to see again as people get back out to restaurants. People start to change, and we see that again, that shift within our supply chain. It was interesting. Maybe not the greatest statement, here, but we saw that in our colleagues in Spain said that their customers on the crop science side were essentially running out of vegetables because everybody was buying fresh vegetables. In this country, we actually saw the opposite because so many of the vegetables were going to restaurants and people were shifting in terms of what they were buying to eat at home. So I think that learning of what these types of disruptions will take and how we overcome them is a key element. Another one that's related to that is I think people are really thinking about their workforce in a different way, and they're thinking about that connectivity, creating an environment that people enjoy working in, and that is something that across the board from our production facilities to our offices. I think every company is thinking about that, and that's going to be an element and a trend that we see where that probably will lead to some functions and elements that we know are more laborious, sometimes challenging from a safety perspective. I think there's going to be further investments in automation, sorry, and an ability to bring in new technologies in that regard and focus people on higher value elements. And I think that's something that a lot of the food chain is thinking about. At the same time, we just saw a speed in terms of the need to change when we're hit with these types of challenges, and how responsive the food chain was but can be. And I certainly think that, but where it might not be e-commerce within our industry, I think a lot of these joined up supply chains and use of technology and digitalization is going to be a big element. So that's something that we're looking at quite a bit, and already had projects in place, and something you have a much better reason really to be thinking about that. But the biggest trend I see globally is really this push around sustainability, and it's something that obviously was already there, but right now I think we can see we've got to grab the opportunity here and realize there is a chance to tell the story of agriculture, which is a story of sustainability in a way that perhaps we were not able to before. And that, we really need to be on the front foot, not thinking like leaders, not thinking like victims in this case. And we've got a couple of big things that are coming up later in the year, where I think that there is that chance to do that. So I think the sustainability aspect would probably be the area that I think is changing the most.
Now, I'm going to make the bold guess that that will be a topic of discussion at this year's Alltech One Ideas Conference, which is coming up just a few weeks down the road, May 25 through 27. Would you preview for us what you're looking forward to about this year's conference? Will be virtually again this year. Always a great program. What do you have in store for us, Mark?
Yeah, so last year it was a different thing. It was a big change. We not that far out had to make the decision, and our team did an incredible job building this platform. And so naturally, in the Alltech way, once it was over, we said, "Hey, let's rebuild it." So we rebuilt the platform. People are going to experience something, I think, highly interactive. We know people have been on a lot of different virtual events over the past year, and I can tell you what I've seen. We've taken elements of the best events we've seen around the world, both within our business and outside, put them together. And again, the key is always bringing that unmatched content and those speakers, but doing it in a different way, creative ways, really trying to make it also as interactive as possible, which is, of course, the negative of not having the physical conference. The exciting part is that you can get to all the content. I know many of your colleagues enjoy this, not having to be stuck in one track, being able to go to different tracks. We've added this element of themes across the tracks. So if you're specifically interested in one area or one theme, you can actually go through the different tracks, not be focused on one species or one topic area. So I think that's going to be an exciting aspect. Again, we really feel like this is going to be an element to the conference. We typically, had those 3,500, 4,000 people in attendance from over 70 countries. That was fantastic. But we got over 20,000 registrants from 126 countries online. And so we see this as being a dual track event in the future, physical conference and a virtual conference. And that's where we decided to come back and say, you know what, this isn't a virtual conference. It is the Alltech One Ideas Conference. That is the name. That is the focus here. And now 37 years in, that constant iteration that our team has, constantly improving it every year, I think you're going to see something unlike anything else. And then when we're back, physical 2022, we already have a team working on that. They've been working on that for over 6 months now. And so that's going to have some really exciting elements. And a lot of those will be revealed during the conference in just coming up in May 25th to 27th.
When you look at the program and the content, you mentioned that kind of unmatched, unparalleled content. So the Mark Lyons Rolodex is pretty strong. What are some of the themes, topics, or tracks that you're most excited about this time?
You almost have to ask me every week, because every week we are doing our weekly call, and we had our pet group presenting past week, and also our beef session, which I have to say, phenomenal. Just some great talks. We have a speaker who's actually from the New York Times, and talks about essentially beef being critical for our health, important for our health, and also for the health of our planet. And a lot of those messages that I think we really need to get out. There's so much right now out there about moving to plant-based, and I think we have to kind of step back and say, what is the best for the planet? What is the best for our ability to feed this growing population? And what is the best for the health of that population? And animal protein, it plays a huge role in that, and not just in wealthy countries, but even more so in developing countries, and the economic sustainability of those individuals and those communities. So that one I was really excited about. So those are the two top of mind for me right now. But our health and wellness session is exciting. We launched a new company called Acutia. And so I think for those familiar with Alltech, there'll be a lot of familiarity to a lot of the things Dr. Lyons talked about. This is a story of entrepreneurship. So this is an entrepreneur within our company being able to create a business and launch that. And so we're going to be talking a bit about that. We're also going to have one of my favorite speakers from a couple of years ago, Dr. Fatui, who talked about brain health and boosting your brain, coming back on and speaking with us. So each week, when we get on our weekly call, you hear new things as we run up to the big event. And I've realized there's so much going on that I'm actually starting to sneak on to the recordings of these as they come forward, because that's probably the only chance I'll be able to have to see as many of the talks as possible.
It is coming up, as I mentioned, May 25 through 27. I'll include the link so folks can get registered at the Alltech One Ideas Conference. I'll include that in the show notes of this podcast. Dr. Mark Lyons, thanks for joining us. For the latest news on trends in global animal food production and economics, including the latest on how COVID-19 continues to influence the industry's fortunes, subscribe to the Feedstuffs Daily e-newsletter, and be sure to visit our virtual community and events platform, Feedstuffs 365. It's part of your subscription to Feedstuffs and can be accessed via feedstuffs.com. This episode of Feedstuffs in Focus was sponsored by Alltech. Join Alltech for the annual Alltech One Ideas Conference coming up May 25th through 27th. You can register for this global virtual agri-food conference by visiting one.alltech.com. I'm Andy Vance, and you've been listening to Feedstuffs in Focus. Thanks for joining us today. If you want to hear more conversations about some of the big issues affecting the livestock, poultry, grain, and feed industries, subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platforms, including Apple and Google Podcasts, or you can always visit the website feedstuffs.com for future episodes. Until next time, have a great day, and thanks for listening.